This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 77.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba. Ramsey once fell in a pond while running after geese. Hope you enjoy the show.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back. So here's a question for you. Is sales really harder than sales engineering? I mean, what does a sales guy actually do? They just show up to a meeting, do a small intro, little banter, possibly, ask a couple of questions about budget, and then give SEs the floor. We do all the heavy lifting, right? So, how many of us SEs have been in a meeting and glanced at a salesperson and thought, I can actually do their job better? I know I thought about that until I actually tried it. So this is not my story. This is Jason Murphy's story. He's today's guest. Jason was an SE for a very long time, and he switched recently to do the sales job maybe 6 months ago. And that's the discussion that we have. We discuss about sales engineering and sales, and what are the things that salespeople do that SEs do not see that makes their job hard, or at least not as easy as what sales engineers think. So before we jump into that, I do have a reminder. So if you've been listening to the podcast and have not left a rating or review, I want to ask you to do that. I would love 5-star reviews, but I actually want constructive feedback because I use that to get better as an interviewer, as an SE, and as a speaker for those solo shows. So enough with that. Let's just get into the show. Good afternoon, Jason. How are you doing?
Wonderful, Ramsey. How are you?
I am excellent. Thanks for coming on. And as I mentioned, the way we usually start is asking you to introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me today. When you reached out to me, I was pleasantly surprised. As you know, I'm no longer a sales engineer, but I do come with 10 years of sales engineering experience. So I like to think I'm an authority on the subject, even though over those 10 years I spent a lot of time learning. That being said, I'm an account executive today. I work for a company called Fully Managed. We are a managed IT provider here based out of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
Nice. So I won't hold it against you that you're no longer an SE.
Fair enough. Okay. I mean, I do miss it some days.
All right. Well, let's talk about it. What do you miss about it?
Well, it's fun. I mean, I got to work with a bunch of great characters over the last 10 years, and a lot of them turned into my personal friends. It's probably one of the reasons why I turned into an account executive this year, is that I saw a lot of those friends do really, really well for them. Sorry, a little spit that out again. Really, really well for themselves, and it was really fun working with them. So, and I think we'll talk later on a little bit about, some sales engineering topics and how it relates to sales. It's one of those things where I think I'll just break the ice and tell you it looks a little bit easy from the outside looking in, but not always the fact. And now that I'm in it, so I mean, being a sales engineer was really, really fun for me. Great relationships, a lot of great partnerships along the way. So, I can't say enough about being an SE either.
I haven't met a single sales engineer who hasn't looked at his sales guy and said, "I can do that job."
Exactly.
Yeah, I was one of them, and yeah, it's not. I did it for a bit because I had to. It's not. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought. Now, those friends of yours, are they all account managers, or why did you decide to move on?
So, I mean, and it's something that I really wanted to break down today is, I knew we were going to talk about account executives. We were going to talk about things like account managers. There's a lot of different terms for, and based on the business or the vertical you're in, whether it's commercial or industrial or software sales or what have you, your definition of sales engineering is fairly broad, right?
Yep.
I was a software sales engineer for those 10 years. So my first kick at the can was when I was a systems administrator who had some, extroverted personality, where I was just doing product demonstrations for a SaaS-based solution that was hosting medical research. And I would do so in front of doctors and a bunch of clinical research folk that worked for pharmaceuticals or what are called contract research organizations. And I would present this technology. And in my after that, I went into a sales engineering role with a company called SolarWinds. So I was there for about 5 years, and that's when I really kind of honed my skills. It was a great sales organization with a lot of great folks, and they kind of really made me kind of do what a sales engineer does, and that's really kind of refine that product demonstration.
So you went from doing sort of an SE job. It wasn't a formal SE job.
Mhm.
At a medical industry,
Mhm.
and you moved completely to another industry, which is in
Yeah.
networking and communication.
Yeah.
How was that move?
Well, to be honest with you, I thought it was going to be fairly easy. I'll tell you a fun little story. When I did my interview with the sales engineering manager at the time, he basically told me, "Here's the software. You've got a couple days. Learn what you can, and I want you to present it to me." So I thought, I've been doing sales engineering like stuff for 3 years now. When I did the presentation, it was like a 20-minute presentation. It had to be very in depth. But it was one of those things that the team lead, who was also in that meeting, came back to me and said, "I really didn't understand a single thing you tried to present."
Ouch.
And I was gutted. I was like, I've been doing product demonstrations for a few years now. I'm sorry. Like I thought I'd do a better job, and can I have another chance? And they're like, I don't know. And at the end of the interview, it's funny because I was doing a little bit of roofing at the time. So I said, well, I'm doing roofing at the time. If you guys need a roof, let me know. And it was funny because I thought that was it. And they called me back and they gave me another shot. And eventually I got the job. So, but they really spent a lot of time with me, training me. I mean, the product that I was demonstrating was really expansive. There was a lot of stuff. It's kind of an all-in-one solution for network monitoring and management. So, it's a big platform, and it took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around things. But yeah, I could transfer those skills.
What do you think made them come back to you and give you another shot?
Hard to say. I think they were trying to make me a little uncomfortable as well. I don't know if you've done, because I don't know your background, but if you've done a product demonstration when there's been a tough question, or even a snide remark, right? You have to be able to take some of that stuff on the chin and then really kind of spin it around, right? I mean, over the years, I've had a lot of people say a lot of different things that I just didn't expect. But when you can kind of take that and turn it into, maybe not a joke, you got to be careful with that, but really kind of understand the motivations and intentions of your audience, right? If they're getting angry with you, or if they're challenging you, there's a reason for it, right? And it's one of those things. When I did my interview, I think they were testing me on that.
Right. Yeah. Most of my interviews, the hiring manager tried to make me feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've never had the situation where someone tried to intentionally frazzle me during an interview, but
Mm-hmm.
I've had customers who have fun making you look bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you start getting into, because I was selling directly to, or as a sales engineer, assisting a sale towards highly technical people,
Yep.
right? I think that's the whole point of sales engineers, is that we're the primary on that technical piece. That's why they're called sales engineers, right? You're taking that engineering acumen, whether you're a systems administrator or Microsoft certified systems engineer or what have you, and really being able to break it down to a business owner or someone who's non-technical or even someone who's also an engineer, right?
Yep.
Convey me the value of your technology. And as someone who is on the phone a lot of the time 8 hours a day from top to bottom, I get an hour for lunch, but I was doing anywhere from 5 to 7 calls a day.
Yep.
My calendar was booked all the time. And sometimes as a sales engineer, you're not always jazzed for that presentation, right? And sometimes it catches you.
Yep. So are you considered, or were you considered, an inside sales engineer?
I would say outside. This is all new business. Now, that being said, I would do product demonstrations for our account managers as well. So I was doing both inside and out.
Okay. My definition of inside sales engineer means that you don't go out and visit customers. All your visits are kind of remote from the
Okay.
office.
So all of my sales engineering, I would say the majority, 98% or 99%, was all kind of what you would determine or say is inside sales.
Okay.
I was simply doing webinars or remote demonstrations. But inside sales to me is like when you start breaking down what a salesperson is.
Yeah.
Inside sales is inbound, right? So you have your customer, typically your customers who have bought from you, and trying to sell to those people inside, right?
So
whereas outbound sales is really kind of hunting and going outside.
Right? Yeah, no, I understand that distinction. So the reason I was asking is, generally speaking, when it's someone like in your position who's in an office and doing demos, you're not working with one account manager or two account managers. How many account managers were you working with at one point?
So an account manager to me is someone who's maintaining accounts, right? So I was working with typically 2, maybe 3. Depends on if we lost a sales engineer or what have you. That stuff kind of happens, right? So typically 2 AEs and 2 AMs, right? So 2 account executives and 2 account managers.
Could you define the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, just it's the inside outside type of thing, okay. Right? So again, with a account manager, you've sold something, right? Okay. So you do a cross sell, upsell, right? Okay. And what you're trying to do is land and expand, right? You take your, for the all-in-one solution I was using for network monitoring and management, they would buy a component. So what we would do is schedule another appointment, 2 months, 6 months, a year down the road, where we would get a call and say, let me show you another feature. And they would, add on to that, right? And increase that monthly revenue. And that's what I was doing for account managers. Now for account executives, you were kind of doing all of it, right? You were really kind of showcasing the technology because 1, they were maybe using a competitor technology, or 2, they just didn't see the value in doing, network remote management monitoring. So it was one of those things where you'd want to go in and kind of showcase what you're able to do. For example, I mean, every RMM has embedded remote control, to a mid-market IT department or a small MSP. Oftentimes they're just relying on VPN and remote desktop. Okay. Now, I'm fairly technical, and we all know that there's data breaches around remote desktop. So having encrypted proprietary remote control is really, really important. So that was really the value there. And you would, kind of land them, bring them into the organization, have that relationship, and then later on, kind of expand on it.
Okay. So your style differed when you were working with AMs, at least with the AM customers and AE customers.
For sure. So when I would, have a conversation with a brand new, organization, right? You're really trying to present overall capabilities, how it's going to make them more money, how it's going to improve their life and their technical life, how their competitor product is deficient in a lot of ways, that kind of stuff. Whereas with account managers, when you're talking to a customer, they've already bought in, right?
Yep.
So oftentimes you're doing a product, just a product component, and doing an upsell.
So these account managers that you've been working with,
Mm-hmm.
they probably molded the way you think about account management and account executiveness, I guess, if that's a word. Is there something that they did that you said, I'm never going to do that? And follow-up question to that, is there something they did that you said, I love that, I'm going to emulate my AE-ness like towards that?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because an AM is someone who is, I have a sales manager I work with. He kind of equates, AMs and AEs to hunting and farming,
Yep.
right? So it's one of those things that when you're farming, you have to focus on relationship, right? Because they're already a customer, right?
Yep.
So it's one of those things that oftentimes that is the stepping stone in sales, right? You go from, SDR, BDR, as your kind of your entry point, business development rep or software development rep. And then from there, you hop into an AM and or AE role. And then from there, typically AE is the kind of the pinnacle, right? That's your kind of outbound sales. That's when you've honed your craft, you're bringing in new business, and obviously you're compensated for it. Now, is there any drawbacks to, or things that AMs don't do? I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine. So you mentioned that your friends kind of, one reason was the friends that you made that pushed you towards moving into the account manager or a salesperson position. What are some of the other reasons that helped you make that decision?
Well, I think we touched on it, and we both, recognized that doing sales looked really easy. I mean, I had the hard job, right? I'm doing a full-on product demonstration. I'm having to captivate the audience, really showcasing the technology. And if you're a sales engineer and you're listening to this and you think, my job is tougher than an AE's, I would say that's debatable. It can be. I mean, it really depends on your product stack. I knew, oh geez, probably 20 plus 30 different products when I was at SolarWinds, and be able to demonstrate them very, very well. To an AE, they're really just, trying to move the business along, really developing the relationship. And I thought I could do that. I'm already doing that as an SE. But there's other things I think we discussed when we first talked, is that there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, right? And I think that's really important to recognize as an SC, is that there's a lot of pressure when you're an AE. And depending on the company, a lot of your numbers that you're forecasting or that you're committing to each month, have a lot of, either, board recognition, management recognition, and people are asking for those numbers on a monthly basis. So you have to be able to, in order to keep your job, you have to be able to demonstrate that you're able to bring in that new business, right? So there's a lot of pressure in that. Whereas when I was an SE, I didn't really feel that, right?
Yep.
I knew I was doing product demonstrations. I was doing them well. My AEs or my account managers were giving me, pats on the back, periodically, not all the time. I mean, whenever an AE has a bad month or an AM, sometimes they're throwing the sales engineer under the bus. I mean, that happens too sometimes.
Yep.
I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but that's the pressure of sales, and that's why developing relationships is really important with your colleagues.
I feel like it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So SEs and AEs or AMs only see each other while they're in the meeting together. What's happening outside to prepare for the meeting, they're very different from SE perspective and also like the salesperson's perspective, and we don't see what the other one is doing. Like I had an account manager tell me, "Hey, like, can you do a demo this afternoon? It's just a few buttons to click." Like, well, no, because I don't know what they want to see, and I also have like a 20 product stack almost.
Right.
Right.
And if it was that easy, why aren't you clicking them
Yeah, and
with the
then
customer?
on
Right.
on the other hand, I once a customer of ours invited us over, invited the account manager over,
Mhm.
and I decided to tag along. And he spent the entire 45 minutes bashing the account manager for no fault of his own. It's just the product. He didn't like the product.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and my account manager is like taking it in stride, like getting information out, being nice to like he dealt with it very well. He even came out like on the positive side. And all I could feel like why aren't you yelling at this guy? Right.
Yeah.
So it's very different skills.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's funny when you're, especially when you're asking for new business. I mean, it's very much a trust relationship, kind of like the trust that an AE has in their SE, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they have a number above their head that they have to hit every month, right?
Yep.
Or at least try to. And AEs obviously want to exceed that, right? That's where they're at. So, I mean, when you're trying to bring in new business, you want to foster the same relationships with your new customers, right? So, if you don't have that out of the gate, if they're bashing you, they're giving you a hard time, you know, that's tough, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so this one was an existing customer of ours. So in my territory, I guess it's the same person who does the farming and the hunting.
right.
The same account manager. So for this one, he's been a customer of ours. He just likes to, like he does that with the competitors. And he does that with
Mhm.
everybody. So yeah, there are a lot of things that we don't see. Is there any other examples that SEs don't see that account managers do? And
Mhm. That AEs or AMs do?
yeah,
Sure. I mean, one is the activities that an AE has to do when they don't have calls, right? If I worked for a very large organization, the reason why I thought my AEs why it looks so easy, because most of the time, from what I saw, I was doing most of the heavy lifting.
yep,
Right. What I didn't see was them calling the customer, asking for the new business, fostering the relationship, and all of the stuff that looks really easy. That takes a real kind of special character to kind of pull off and do well,
yeah,
right? And I mean, I love to do some shout outs. I won't do any, but I've worked with some really great sales folk over the years. And you know, one in particular, when I started, kind of took me under his wing. He was one of probably the best sales guys that the organization had, and it's one of those things. I even followed him over to the company I'm at, fully managed right now, and he's no longer here. But it's one of those things where he was just one of those sales guys that just made building relationships look very, very easy. So I thought I could do that, and to this day I still think I can, but it's definitely harder than it looks. You have to be built a certain way to be able to pull it off well.
well, it's always interesting. Like for me, it's easy to build relationships with my customers
Mhm.
because at the end of the call, I'm not asking them for money,
Right.
right? Whereas you guys have to ask for money, and that kind of even if the AE and the customer really like each other on a personal basis, as soon as there's money involved, the whole like framework changes.
Right. And there's psychology to this, because your AEs aren't asking them for money, at least not directly. They're going to ask for the business, right? Because that's the intent, right?
Yeah,
That's why we're all employed. Um, but it's not. I mean, the money is the byproduct of a lot of other stuff that your AMs or your AEs are doing,
yeah,
right?
definitely. Like they're not flat out asking them like, "Hey, give me the $1,000." They're asking like, "Hey,
Exactly.
we did all this. Can we work together?"
Mhm.
But in the end,
Yes.
I feel like it always comes down. At least in my industry, it always comes down to if the SE didn't do their job well, if the account manager didn't do their job well, when they start asking for that PO,
Mhm.
that it changes the relationship. So how do you deal with that? Like going from SE to now account manager. You've been an account manager for almost a year now.
Not quite. I would say, 6 months,
6 months.
8 months now.
Okay. So how have you dealt with that aspect that you've never done before?
Sure. I have been a student of the game as well, though. I have watched the salespeople that I've worked with over the years and how effective they have been. And I've always kind of learned tips and tricks along the way, and it actually made me a better sales engineer for it. Because when you can, give your AE or your your salesperson a layup, as I call it,
Yep.
Trust me, you come off like a rock star. So it's one of those things where I didn't really pay attention to everything, but just the little things. It made the product demonstration seem really easy. And I would get thank yous for that. But when you're asking for new business, and I'm still learning and I'm still kind of honing my craft, is that there's tough questions that you have to ask as well, right? It really depends on your audience. Are you dealing with someone who is an influencer, right? So they're taking it up to the chain to management. Do you have management on the line? So do you have a decision maker?
Yep.
You have to recognize who you're talking to and kind of respond accordingly, right?
Yep.
So if I'm doing a product demonstration, and I still do them periodically, it's one of those things where, if I'm talking to an IT manager, IT director, it's very different than speaking to the CFO or the CIO, someone who has, signing authority,
Yep.
right? You have to be able to make certain distinctions when you're asking questions.
Okay, that's very good. So, what are the skills that AEs have that SEs could benefit from?
It's funny you ask that, because that's one of the questions I actually wrote down and kind of prepared for.
Nice.
So it's one of those things where, I clicked that. I don't need that. I just want to click on this there. So, I mean, some of the best skills that I've learned from the salespeople that I've dealt with are really kind of what I would deem the soft skills, right?
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I work with a salesperson or an account executive. His name was Derek. Phenomenal guy, made sales just look easy, right? And it's one of the reasons why I aspired to kind of be an SE, right? But as an SE, when you want to be effective and be really good at what you do, you can learn from your AE as well to parlay the sale, right? To make it easier for both of you, right? Because a win is a win. You're probably getting comp the same way as the AE is, maybe not as much, but it's one of those things where you're able to, help the sale along, right? Now, one of the things I always recognize is that is asking questions, right? Not talking too much. The problem with sales engineers is that when you're doing a product demonstration, and I'm probably doing it right now, is that you tend to go on and on because you love the technology, you love doing the demonstration, you want to do that customer buy-in, but often in sales, when you're an AE, it's all about listening, right? So you have to ask those tough questions. You have to understand what are the motivations and intentions of your customer for the reasons why they want to buy, right?
Yep.
So, SEs typically will do things like, plan and modify the product. So there's a hybrid role too. I dealt with this early on when I was an SE, is that I wasn't just a sales engineer in terms of just product demonstrations. I was also an SA, so I was doing solutions architect as well.
Right.
There's a lot of different hybrid roles to sales engineering, right? So, typically a sales engineer is someone who is assisting the sale, not typically doing kind of, support and even though I was doing a little bit of that when I first started. But you want to be collaborative. First and foremost, I would always recommend, knowing your account executive, right? I think it's important. What do you just listen to them. What do they think is important, right?
Yeah.
You're doing the product. You're doing the product demonstration. What are some of the tips and tricks that they think would help the sale along? Even though, yes, you're doing, again, a lot of the work in terms of the product demonstration, there are some of those soft skills that you can kind of take away.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily ask any tough questions because that's really not your job. But it'd be one of those things that I would ask, whenever I'm kind of going through my product demonstration, and typically I'd give myself anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 just for my demonstration. And because I would leave the remaining time for my salesperson to set up follow-ups and everything else, is that you want to be mindful of what are some of those triggers during the sale, right? And that's what I caught along the way. I wish I could give you some specifics. I can't really think of any off the top of my head. But as I was doing product demonstrations, I always want to grab a pulse of the customer to see where they're at. Do you like this? Typically, when I was at SolarWinds, we used to call it the wow factor. When people were like, "Oh wow, that's really good. I really like that." You got a few of those along the way, you knew you were on the right track.
Like reading the room remotely.
Right. Exactly. Knowing your audience. It's really, really important.
So, question about doing remote demos. Did you have your camera on or off during the demo?
I would say majority off, right? I've got a voice for radio. So
I don't know. I'm looking at you. I don't like, you don't give yourself enough credit.
I do all right for an old guy. So but it's one of those things where, it was one of those things where, you did want to like take away from the screen. There's only so much real estate, I typically turn it off unless requested, right? Or if the customer has their webcam turned on,
right?
I would go ahead and then do it. But I would say 99% of the time it was always turned off.
Yeah, like I talked to the author of Great Demo. His name is Peter Cohan, and like he teaches demo for a living. And he mentioned for remote demos, it's the best thing to do is maybe turn it on to say hello, and then turn it off not to distract from the demo.
I think that's a great tip. Yeah. Right. Again, that allows the audience, the potential customer, the prospect, to kind of get familiar with who they're talking to. So yeah.
So you mentioned you still do some demos every now and then, and you're in a different company, so you don't have the luxury of knowing the former products. So you're learning new products, you're selling new products, and you're still doing demos. How do you keep up technically?
You sent this question to me, and it's funny because I had to really think about it. Is that now that I feel like I'm in sales, it's not like I necessarily need to be technical. Yeah. I've been technical for I think I told you I used to look after Windows NT, so I've been doing this for a long time.
Yep.
So I feel like I have the basics down, and I'm never going to lose that. However, if I'm doing sales for another 15 years and technology is always changing, I might get a little rusty in some areas. But I think in terms of either product demonstrations or knowing the foundations of network architecture, network foundations, or systems administration, I think I've got that stuff down, and that's really what I'm still speaking to. Okay. Even though I started off in kind of medical research, I'm still in kind of the IT vertical, right? So I'm talking about firewalls, switches, servers, VMware, Microsoft, all those product stacks, right? And then being able to talk to the right person and conveying the value of doing business with fully managed.
So if there's an SE who wants to switch to sales, what would you tell them? I would tell them that don't do it, but what would you tell them?
I wouldn't tell them not to do it, but I would definitely say you want to be a darn good sales engineer, right? And I would say I didn't really get good at sales engineering until probably my 4th or 5th year. Okay. I also had some really, and I'm not lying here, I had some really awesome salespeople I worked with. And that was really important for me. I did learn from them a lot. And, even to this day, even though I don't work with them anymore, they're still my friends. I still talk to them, and I still hang out with them periodically as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So why 4th to 5th year do you feel like that's when you became a
that was just me. I mean, if you're super smart, maybe you can get it done in a couple of years. I mean, I've trained a number of sales engineers along the way as well. I've seen some very, very, people with, metal pinky rings come from university first year, get their, first sales job as an SE, very motivated, right? I'll give you an example. His name's Omar. Very, very smart guy. Even though his first week with me, he was on Ramadan and he fell asleep on one of my demos. So he won't listen to this, but it was pretty funny. But it was one of those things where I think if you were to even ask him, a smart guy as he is, it took him a couple of years, right? So, and I think initially he wanted to make the leap over into sales. He actually made the leap into product marketing. So there's a lot of different avenues for sales engineers. It's not just the pinnacle of being an AE and doing outbound sales. There are other skills that you're going to be able to take away. At the end of the day, a sales engineer is a unicorn, right? You sales and you're a tech, right? They're also very, very hard to find. At least the good ones are very, very hard to find.
I can tell you from my experience, my first year and a half was a complete wash because like you were lucky you got good salespeople to learn from. I had one salesperson that I was attached to, and all we did was spray and pray. You familiar with that spray and pray methodology?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for a year and a half until someone came and told me you're doing it wrong. So I felt like I wasted a year and a half.
Right.
But yeah, by the fourth year, I didn't even know if I'm doing it right, which is why I started this podcast. So yeah, I agree with you. It tends to take a little bit of time because it's not just technology. There's a lot of soft skills that no one tells you have to learn. You just have to figure it out as you go.
Yeah, and as someone who is, I've run help desks before in the past. I've worked with various technicians. I've been an IT manager in the past, where I've had groups of probably anywhere from 6 to 10 technicians under me. It's one of those things that there's a lot of different personalities you need to speak to as well.
Yep.
Some technicians have a God complex, right? That's what I call it.
Yeah.
But they're very authoritative, right? I want to know what I want to know right now. You skip the rest of I'm steering this conversation, right? And you got to play that game. And oftentimes, if you do, you can get them interested in other areas, right? Yeah. That's a skill to have. That's not something that you're going to learn probably within the first 6 months to a year, right? Yeah. You have to be able to nurture and take tough conversations and be able to expand on them and make people interested in them. That's a skill set. That's important.
Nice. I agree. 100%. So I think it's time to move to the not so fire round. These are 4 questions I ask most of my guests.
Let's do it.
And you basically take your time answering them. So like every other question I've asked so far.
Sure.
So what is the one thing you love about being what you are today, or like an AE or an SE, whichever one you want to answer, or both?
Sure. I mean, I look back very fondly on being a sales engineer. Again, a lot of it had to do with the environment I was in, the people I was working with, and you know what? We were really successful at doing it. So I worked for SolarWinds. I made a good clip of money when I was there. It's one of those things where, being a sales engineer was fun while it lasted, but I wouldn't say I got bored of it, but I just needed another challenge, right?
Yep.
And I thought going into an account executive role was going to do that. So that's where I'm at today. I've been doing it for about 6 months now. Still learning. I've got a good sales leader here at Fully Managed that I deal with every day. So it's one of those things where I know I'm going to learn and improve, and I'm very confident that I'm going to kill it.
Nice. Good. Second question. What is the one thing you would change about sales engineering?
You know what? And it's something that some of the topics that we've already touched on. Sales engineers think they do a lot of stuff. And you know what? They do.
Yep.
And oftentimes they are looked as a kind of a support person. So you really need to have the right personality as a sales engineer, that it's a balance, right? You're a complement to the sales process, right? You are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. You are doing a lot of the showcasing. I did video demonstrations on certain aspects of our technology, and strangely enough, I did a massive product demonstration for them. And it's one of those things where you get a little bit of a swelled head when you're a sales engineer, because you're technical and you're sales,
Yep.
right? But you also need to recognize that it's a team that you're working with. Maybe it's one person. I mean, I worked with 4 people, so you're all in it to win, and that's really the mindset you got to take away from.
I feel like management should make an SE the sales guy for 2 weeks and the sales guy an SE for 2 weeks, and everybody will appreciate everybody else's job.
Well, I can tell you, a lot of the AEs that I worked with would crash and burn. They couldn't do a product demonstration if they tried. I think AEs do have a lot of respect for sales engineers, as long as they're good.
Yeah. Well, I feel like AEs who were SEs at some point or have worked with SEs for a long time know what SEs do. Like I was telling you about my former sales guy who told me, "Hey, we have a demo this afternoon. It's just a few clicks." He's never worked with an SE before, and he was brand new on the job. So,
of course,
once we had that discussion, everything worked out.
Right.
But still, all right. Is there a book or resource that every sales engineer should be exposed to?
I wish I would have had this question before, because I've actually read a lot of good sales books along the way. I can't think of one off the top of my head, probably because I'm on a podcast right now. But
do you want to send it to me later?
Oh, I could definitely send it to you later. It's just a lot of them had to do with closing.
Okay.
So I was kind of prepping to be an AE even before I was an AE, right? Because I actually thought, if I can use some of those closing tactics on a sales engineer, I would, close more business, make more money, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. So one additional skill that an SE should have is the ability to close. At least the technical close.
Yeah, and not that it's really their job, and I would say you have to be careful with that, because sometimes if you're trying to ask closing questions, that might ruffle some feathers with the AE. So really know your audience. But there's still certain things you can touch on. There's certain things that during a demo you want to make sure that the customer is confident that you related to them. Right.
And that's what I call the technical close.
Yeah, of course.
Make sure all technical questions have been answered, and they can't use anything as an objection. And
absolutely.
The sales guy can get the rest.
Right, and if there are objections, make sure that you're able to work through them.
All right. So last question: where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably my most professional source. So if you want to go on to LinkedIn and search for Jason Murphy 357, that's where you can find me.
Jason Murphy 357. I will put that in the show notes, and this will be show 77. So wetheSalesEngineers.com/show77. Everybody can find the information there. Thanks a lot, Jason. I do appreciate your time. I hope this was fun for you. And
yeah, I mean, this was amazing. I always like talking about sales engineering. Like I said, I had a pretty good experience with it. So I'm hoping at least somebody can take something away from this conversation.
I'm sure I had fun. Thanks a lot again for your time. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Ramsey, reach out anytime.
Will do.
Cheers.
Hey guys, you still there? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with Jason. Jason, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you stayed late at work for this, so thank you. After stopping the recording with my external equipment that you guys can't see here, Jason and I kept going. We kept talking about different things. Luckily, I use Zoom as the conference call software, and it kept recording. So I've added that section after I'm done here. And because I'm not Marvel, I'm not gonna come back up and talk about it again. I don't do post-credit scenes. So enjoy the extra bit with Jason. And with that, this is Ramsey signing off.